Hi, I'm Dave Scott. I'm a Senior Director of Product Management at Veritas, and today I'm going to talk about strategies for information governance. Information governance has never been more difficult. Not only do you have the constant problem of growing data, but you have new content sources you have to consider. It's a flood of Zoom and Teams video and voice content, including transcripts. And on top of that, there's new regulations. There's massive fines last year for a couple of banks that didn't properly capture all communications between the brokers and the end customers, specifically encrypted channels like WhatsApp and WeChat. Billion-dollar fines for failure to capture. So you've got to capture additional sources, make sure you're capturing everything you need to, but you also have to manage the massive amount of content that's collected. A recent study showed that there's 181 zettabytes of data in the world by 2025. There will be by 2025. And couple that with a Veritas study that showed that only 14% of content is business critical. That means that most of your data is not serving an active purpose, not being used on a regular basis. We further found that 32% is what we call rot, redundant, obsolete, and trivial, which means it's content that doesn't serve a business purpose and that can actually even obscure business critical content, just as it gets in the way of search results and so on. You want to have a strategy to get rid of rot whenever possible and avoid it in the future. But the big concern is that 54% of content is what we call dark data. And dark data is essentially content that we don't have visibility into. It might be old data, it might just be content that has been forgotten and no longer touched. This can be a problem because, first of all, you might have business critical data stuck in the lower part of the iceberg here. You might have content that is actually subject to regulation, like personally identifiable information. Personally identifiable information must be detected so you know if you have the right as a company to keep that content, and so that you can delete it upon request if someone makes a right to be forgotten request. We might have company IP in here, which maybe that's something you want to surface and make available, but you also want to protect it. So how do you attack dark data? There's a couple things you can do. First of all, you want to detect content that is stale, content that is no longer being used, hasn't been accessed in 4 or 5 years. You might want to pair this, though, with knowing who the owner of the content is. If the content is stale, but it was created by the CEO at the time, you might want to keep that as part of the corporate memory, corporate record. You may even need to keep it as part of a regulation. But otherwise, you can probably delete stale content. So I think that's one easy thing to knock off. Next, we want to classify the content. And you might want to classify content based on how active it is or based on the user. But classification allows you to detect the PII. It allows you to detect the company IP. It allows you to look for anything that will cause you problems. And of course, it comes back to being able to detect that rot that you can get rid of. Now, the ultimate goal for most companies that I talk to, they want to get to the cloud or go further into the cloud and get out of the data center business. Obviously, you're going to bring your business critical content to the new location. It's active and it's very, very necessary. You're going to delete the rot, and you're going to implement policies where in the new location, you don't incur rot in the future. Now you're going to understand your dark data. You're going to know what content is important, what content goes here, and then also what content could go into an archive. And this would be content that's stale, inactive, but relevant and important to the company. Think of things like an old contract that's still active, but no one touched the document because they don't have to. They just need to keep that record until the contract expires. So lots of good reasons to put content in an archive where it can be indexed, where it can be classified and made readily available. So I hope this has been helpful. This is a good way of getting to a new steady state. We've got a lot of other materials on dark data and how to combat it, and we are doing a promotion around dark data assessments, which you may qualify for. Please contact your sales rep.